The story I want to tell is not the following one. Edward Salmon from the United States was diagnosed with severe psychosis at the age of 28. A victim of an unnatural creative stimulus and at the mercy of his irregular reality, he left intriguing drawings that would captivate any psychoanalyst. Why do you think Edward has drawn the brain on the outside of the head? I don't have answers, but those who studied the case have theorized that Edward, being aware of having a brain, felt the need to include it in the image. However, the patient didn't understand that the brain is sheltered inside his head and that there was no need to draw it in a self-portrait, as it is implied that he possesses it. It's curious that, despite how logical it may seem, some minds are incapable of seeing the set of patterns we apocryphally call reality. It wouldn't make sense to discuss what is or isn't real, or whether the psychological evaluation is accurate, because as I said before, this is not the story I want to tell you. But to tell what became of Kana's blog, we must first go back to 2chan. In this case, there isn't much information available. In fact, the page doesn't exist anymore, and all that's left is a testimony from a user who says the following. This happened more than 10 years ago. At that time, I was a university student living alone. Even on the internet, it wasn't an era where you could watch many videos like now, so I mainly read 2ch and blogs. This testimony reached a popular content creator in Japan named Amana-san. As it was his friend who experienced these events, he didn't want to reveal his real name, so we'll call him Mr. S. It all started in a thread dedicated to sharing curious blogs or websites. Ironically, among all the eye-catching pages, the only one that stood out was the simplest. The name was Disappearance of Kana's Diary. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing irregular, and everything provoked him to try to leave so as not to waste any more time. But one thing caught his attention, and that's what brings us to this story. The following image was posted on September 4th, 2008, with the following description. Kana is finally back to normal. She's a bit less anxious, and we had fun on the futon. The image is a drawing that Kana did today. The same image was signed by Kent. At first glance, one might think that the page is just a diary of a father recounting his experiences with his daughter. That's what Mr. S thought, and he described it as a tender relationship of fatherhood, where he didn't care if the futon got dirty, as long as to see Kana happy. But this story has only just begun. Out of curiosity, he went to the first post of the blog to try to understand why such an innocent page had such a peculiar name. Thus, he arrived at the beginning of everything titled, Welcome, which said, Nice to meet you, I'm Kent, and I'm starting my diary from today. This is a drawing by Kana. Here there was only one image, quite different from the one seen in the last post. It was strange. It didn't even look like it was drawn by a little girl, and even if it was, it seemed impossible that it was the same person who drew the last image. There was a clear deterioration, which prompted Mr. S to read the entire blog and give us a valuable testimony of Kana's diary. The entry for the following day contained trivial information, with just a comment about her liking for jam. The third day brought a new drawing but little information. Nevertheless, on the fourth day, everything changed completely. Today is a special day. It has been 3 months since Kana and I started going out. We celebrated with cake. Kent and Kana were a couple, an abnormal fact, as he seemed to treat her as his daughter. Perhaps some kind of reverse Oedipus complex, or a projection of an absent family attachment. This is not the case of this video. From May 4th to 11th, all the content was ordinary, narrating shopping, meals and other daily life as a couple. On May 12th, we will start to see an irregular pattern. As you can see, the drawing is the same as the one from May 2nd, but with less detail and a curious comment. Kana wants to see a drawing of mine, but I don't have any artistic talent. I can only pick up the pencils that Kana drops. This last comment leaves us wondering that maybe it is something very specific to mention. It doesn't make sense to bring it up, but at the same time, it appears as innocent as the page itself. Things don't improve. On May 15th, a new image with worse quality. On May 21st, we are given an image that doesn't even seem to have been made with effort, and Kent acknowledges it, but still says that he likes any image by Kana. The image from May 29th is simply surreal, but the explanation is certainly realistic. It's been a long time since we last saw each other. I hadn't updated for more than a week, dear readers. Today I have to tell you something. It's about Kana. She currently suffers from a mental disorder. For a month now, the conversations with her have been incoherent compared to before. She has become expressionless. We live together, so it has become uncomfortable and sad. But I like her, and I do my best to take care of her. Everything has become shrouded in a melancholic atmosphere, but let's be cautious and keep reading. Kana is a girl who often laughs, but now she looks somber. Even when I talk to her, she doesn't respond much. She puts a lot of effort into drawing and just stares at the flowers. Today, Kana looked out the window and kept murmuring. Lately, it seems like Kana is not Kana. Where did that Kana go who used to say silly things and watch television with me? But I have to be strong. It's past midnight. Kana couldn't sleep, so I was massaging her feet. Kana's legs were thin and cold. She has lost a lot of weight recently. She has also been drawing a lot, and I think she wants to convey something to me. Kana is disappearing from Kana. The Kana who loved me will soon disappear. I can sense it. There are some points that both Mr. S and I find unsettling. Even though the blog mentions the day-to-day activities, there is no mention of Kana undergoing any kind of treatment or visiting a doctor. I don't know anything about the topic, especially because Kent doesn't mention Kana's disorder, but it is amazing that his mind degenerated so quickly in a matter of a few days. If it were due to an accident, it would be logical for Kent to have mentioned it, as he shares other events from his life. It seems clear to me that something is being hidden, especially considering how quickly Kent accepted Kana's mental decline. The following will only confirm it. At this point, Mr. S decided to leave a comment on the blog expressing his concern for Kana and recommending that Kent take her to a hospital. There was no response for a while, and he thought Ken might be busy. The blog continued to update, completely ignoring the comment, which is peculiar because, at that moment, it seems that Mr. S was the only one who knew about the page. The next drawing curiously doesn't come from Kana but from Kent, who said he remembered the time when Kana asked if she could see a drawing from him. He tried to do it, but according to his own words, he lacks talent. That was the last post on the blog, and what may appear to be a sad story could have a new meaning when noticing some small details. Mr. S discussed the fact with some acquaintances, and it was his couple who noticed that the images of the flowers looked very similar to a popular calendar in Japan that had been sold earlier that year. It was so common, there was no doubt that they were the same images, and in turn, it was not difficult to get a sample of the calendar. At first it was a mere curiosity, which shown by the fact that Kana drew multiple times the same image of the month in question. One might wonder why she clung to drawing the same thing even before her mental faculties declined. It was still very strange, but since Mr. S had delved into it, he would go all the way. He discovered that it was more than just a curiosity. It seemed to be some kind of pattern. Kana never drew on weekends, and luckily, Kent published her images on the same day she made them. This led Mr. S to believe that there must be a relationship between the dates, and the increasingly distorted images. Why would she use a sketch calendar when she could also see real flowers through the window? He had nothing to lose by investigating. Perhaps it was far-fetched, but at some point, Mr. S came up with the idea of using the calendar as a reference to make sense of the images. After much analysis, he considered placing each image on the day it was drawn. There was clearly a pattern there, and it was just a matter of downloading and arranging the images to uncrypt the truth. I don't know how long it took him to reach this conclusion, but he solved it. The images were saying something, and that was help. It seems that things were turned around, and Kana wasn't a young woman with a mental disorder, but it seemed quite the opposite. And if it was Kent who suffered from it, and without being eccentric, it is possible that Kana was abducted. Mr. S, in commenting on this, mentioned another case that he discovered sometime after the experience with Kana's blog that now seems similar to us. Do you know about the disappearance of Jane Asher? I read an article in a magazine some time ago. This is what happened in the United States in the 1980s. A man kidnapped a woman and held her in a bed in his house with her legs tied together. At first, the woman resisted, but when she realized she could not escape, she pretended to be obedient to the man, hoping to save her life. It was said that she kissed him, or gave him her body if he asked her to. She was only 14 years old, but luckily, the police managed to seize the house and rescue her a few years later. Although in his testimony the man said that they were lovers, and that there was nothing strange about their relationship. The man was Edward Salmond. He had been diagnosed with severe psychosis. Now all the messages had a new meaning. She wasn't going to the hospital because she wasn't suffering from anything, and even if she was, he wouldn't let her leave. Possibly comments like the one about Kana not being able to put her pencils together, or that her legs were cold, could be linked to her inability to move, although it is only a theory. It is possible that Kana simulated a disorder to infiltrate a message in her images, and she was fortunate that someone took the trouble to understand her message. If you think about it, it was all a series of coincidences, because surely Kent was the one who published the link to his page in order to spread it, and in turn, the fact that the blog had such a striking name that referred to Kana's supposed disorder made Mr. S enter. But there is a chance that the only thing he was unlucky about was the outcome. As expected, once Mr. S discovered the mystery of the page, he tried to report it to the Japanese police. Kana's fate was uncertain, and we only know that after the police call, Kana's blog completely disappeared from the internet, leaving us with only a few captures made by Mr. S and his testimony as the only evidence of the fact. We could be optimistic and think that Kana was released, perhaps by luck or coincidence, although we could not ignore the fact that maybe the case, when solved, would have been given media diffusion, so we can think that it was solved in private without reaching the legal. Or maybe Kana's fate will be forever uncertain. Although there may be one last, dreamlike option, where all this time, there was no Kana, and it was all a product of Kent's mind. Unfortunately, a final testimony was added by Mr. S, where he possibly years after everything happened, came across a peculiar book containing drawings made by criminals with mental disorders. There, he encountered the case of Edward, but beyond that, he stumbled upon a peculiar image that he had seen before. In that book there was the same drawing Kent made, sometime after the events in Kana's diary. They used it as an example of a person with severe psychosis. For the writer of the investigation, the person showed things that should be hidden, such as cut branches or roots. For logical as it may seem, there are minds incapable of seeing this series of patterns that we apocryphally call reality. But, as I must reiterate, this is not the story I wanted to tell you. A truth that oscillates between lies, or a lie that oscillates between truth. I suppose that is the magic of Tuchan. There are jarring points in the story, such as Mr. S solving the message quickly, or Kana being there long enough to write, "help," in Japanese. Although many people in Japan doubt the veracity of the case, in all honesty, this version of the story was created by the user Amana-san, who is dedicated to creating cases that simulate being real, but as he himself indicates, they are all fictitious. However, as I said on 2chan, nothing is as true or as false as it seems. While investigating the case, I saw that there are people who claim to have seen the page long before the creator made his story. Nobody seems to remember its original name, but we can't ignore the comments. It is possible that Amana took inspiration from another page that became slightly popular on 2chan, which was mixed with a real case that occurred in Japan, where a woman would infiltrate help messages through a receipt. I cannot confirm if there was a real case of Kana's diary. There are only sober suppositions from anonymous people who vaguely remember a blog of a girl who started drawing strange things. It's possible that Amana-san used this as inspiration to create his own legend. But we will probably never know how the events unfolded, because the origin of Kana's diary is as mysterious as its ending. Although, in fact, that wasn't the story I wanted to tell you, but it's too late to continue with this. This is Gasper's paradox. And this never happened.